I am fine with admitting when I'm wrong about a comic. Sometimes I don't have a full perspective, or sometimes I am just biased against that comic, or sometimes I need to read more issues of a series before I can see the full value of it. After all, art is subjective. I could read the same comic on 2 different days and love it one day and hate it the next day, or at least not see any value in it the next day. So I went back and I reread those first 3 issues of Void Rivals, and now I'm fully caught up on all 10 issues. And I sincerely asked myself, was I wrong to say the series was overhyped and undercooked? And I think, no, I was right. The series is not good. Howdy, I'm Kurt Williams, and today we're looking at Void Rivals by Robert Kirkman and Lorenzo de Felici. Void Rivals started about a year ago as the flagship book of the Energon universe, which is a shared universe with Transformers and G.I. Joe, and now these characters. This series instantly blew up because, well, it's Robert Kirkman, and everybody wants to read a new series from the guy who brought us Invincible and The Walking Dead, but also because in the first issue we see these characters in their own universe, but then a Transformer shows up, which gives us the idea of a shared universe. Since then, I've seen almost nothing but positive reviews, and plenty of people are even saying that the series would still be great even without the Transformers cameos. And I disagree with that, but I'll say more later. It's not until the latest issue, issue 10, when we see that the Transformers aren't just cameo characters who exist on the peripheral of this universe, but they're really at the heart of the Void Rivals universe. The 2 main characters, Derek and Celila, are representatives of their 2 separate alien races who exist on one planetary body, the Agorans for Derek and the Zertonians for Celila. And these 2 alien races have been at war with each other for forever, and we don't know exactly why, but it probably has something to do with this super ancient Transformer deity called Zerta Trion, who exists for the Zertonians as a god. And like I said in my last video, I don't have any frame of reference for any Transformers lore. I wasn't a fan as a child, I haven't watched the TV shows, I haven't read the comic books. If there are any references to deep Transformers lore that make other people excited, they're probably not making me excited. So I'm sure for some people it's a really exciting idea that the Agorans and Zertonians are actually some kind of synthetic alien descendants of some ancient Transformers deity, but for me it's just kind of lore that doesn't really mean anything to me yet. What complicates the story is that the 2 rulers of the alien races are secretly prolonging the war, discussing it with each other so that it can keep going on, because they know that if they stop warring with each other, they will release Goliant, which is some kind of also ancient Transformer deity-like creature? I don't know. It's not clear why the unity of 2 peoples would cause the escape of some ancient deity creature, but I'll just leave that to be explained later. So that's the gist of the story. Now let's look at the problems I have. The first problem I have is a pretty big one. These characters are boring. These 2 characters and their forced relationship is an obvious ripoff of Star-Lord and Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy. Derek is goofy and kinda happy-go-lucky, but he's way more annoying than Chris Pratt's version of the character, and Celila is deadly and serious, but there's really nothing else to her. Every time there's dialogue between the 2 of them, I just cringe so hard because it feels so forced and there's nothing of substance there. It's just cliche after cliche the whole time. I have no reason to care about Derek, and he's so annoying that I actively dislike him, and it's not until issue 9 that I finally have a reason to be sympathetic towards Celila, but it's really not a good reason. Derek is, you'll never guess, the prince of the Agorans and gets no respect from his father, the king of the Agorans. Sound familiar? And the ruler of the Zertonians is not Celila's adoptive father, like the Thanos-Gamora parallel, but he is a very Thanos-like character. He's very imposing and scary. And those 2 rulers are also boring and cliche. When we find out that they're secretly prolonging the war together, it's not a surprise at all. Also, when we find out that the Agorans and Zertonians, despite their venomous hate for each other, are actually basically the same species, that's not a surprise at all either. When the Zertonian ruler finds out that Celila has seen the face of Derek and knows that the 2 races are basically the same thing, he throws her in jail as an enemy of the people to shut her up. Big surprise. And then a bunch of generic rebel characters come to break her out of jail so that she can go fulfill a prophecy. Where do they think of this stuff? This comic is Star Wars and Guardians of the Galaxy slammed together with absolutely none of the flavor involved. For a second there, I thought I was gonna like one of these rebel kids, Ultim, because he's got that cool mask, but then he was immediately boring within like 5 pages. And then we've got this character Proximus, this really intense bounty hunter that the Zertonians sent out after Celila and Derek. And listen, I don't know if this counts as a spoiler or not, but the series is so predictable, I'm fairly certain that Proximus is Celila's long-lost brother. And I'm sure that people like him because he's a very Boba Fett type character. I mean, I love Boba Fett too, and he's really edgy and cool, but he's yet another character that I just can't find it within myself to care about. He does manage to almost succeed successfully hold his own against this Transformer until he gets pinned under his giant sword. And in one of the most frustrating moments of the whole series, he crawls away, leaving behind one of his robot arms and legs, even though those were not the things pinned down by the giant sword, and the part of him that is essential to function, which was pinned down by the giant sword, did manage to get out somehow. Like, I know you want to demonstrate Proximus's resilience here and have him staggering through the wasteland without one arm and one leg, one from each side so he's perfectly balanced so he can reasonably move around still and just look like a badass, but it doesn't make any sense. There is one character that is starting to grow on me as the series goes, and that is Skuxoid. We meet him in issue 2 when he captures Celila and Derek, and he's just kind of a throwaway character who's going around picking up aliens so he can sell them off. He's a bounty hunter. But then throughout the series, we keep checking in with him as he's trying to sell this alien to a bunch of other races so that he can make money, and he keeps saying, "Oh, please, I have a wife and kids. I gotta make money so I can feed my family." And you get the sense that he's kind of slimy. He's probably lying so he can get some extra money. But then in issue 9, we check in on him finally arriving home, and he remembers that he doesn't have a family, either because he lost them or he just never had them in the first place. And up until that point, it was getting funnier and funnier checking in with him as he's trying to tote around these aliens that he's selling. But now, I kinda care about this character. He's my favorite part of Void Rivals. So to tie all that up, the characters I'm supposed to care about, I don't. And the characters that I'm probably not supposed to care about, I really do. Every issue has what's supposed to be some big reveal at the end, but it's so obvious every single time. It's just exhausting how obvious it is and how much emotion they want me to have towards it, but I just don't. And I've heard people say that it's a Robert Kirkman comic, so it's kind of a slow burn and not much happens in each issue, but how you're really supposed to read it is in these super fat trade paperback versions where you can read all of it at once. And I agree with part of that. I do think that barely anything happens per issue, and I do think it would be better if I read a lot of it all at once, but I don't think it's a slow burn. I just think that there isn't much burn in the first place. There is plot. We are learning things every issue. It's just not compelling or interesting or unique. And you could say, well, what makes the story interesting is all the deep lore about Transformers stuff, but that lore is just not very accessible. If you already know it or you know most of it and this is filling in some holes for you, yeah, that's pretty cool, and you can probably jump in and understand what's going on. But for those of us who aren't already Transformers fans, this just doesn't mean anything to me, and it seems overly complicated, and I just don't care. Like, after reading these 10 issues and I just didn't feel like I cared about the story, I went back and I read Guardians of the Galaxy by Brian Michael Bendis to see what a good Guardians of the Galaxy story really feels like. And you can cram so much more information into a single comic book and have it feel way more dynamic and have a whole range of emotions in it. If you think this is good, then you should read this because it's gonna blow your mind. And you might say, well, that's not fair. That's Brian Michael Bendis. He's like one of the biggest comic writers of the last 30 years. And to that I say, so is Robert Kirkman. And this was a flagship book of the Energon universe. This is supposed to be the most exciting one. They've got a superstar creative team on the leading book of a major franchise, and I can't stay awake during each issue. It doesn't feel like there was any genuine care put into it. It feels half-baked. It feels like Kirkman went to a meeting and the people at Image said, "We want you to write a great new series to head off the Energon series. Got any ideas?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, we could have these synthetic Transformers descendants who are at war with each other, maybe some kind of Star Wars type thing." And they said, "Great, we need the script tomorrow." I don't know, it could be so much better. Probably the reason I think it's so bad is because it has so much potential. If this were a series written by somebody I'd never heard of, illustrated by somebody I'd never heard of, and it had these exact same ideas and the exact same dialogue, I might like it more, I'll admit. I might even say something like, it's a timeless tale about finding common purpose with your enemy in wartime. Which is a story that I normally love to read, but coming from these creators in this universe at this time just doesn't seem good enough. So to conclude, I think that Void Rivals is boring, uninspired, and predictable, and I don't care about the characters at all, except for Skuxoid, who I'm probably not supposed to care about much. So I'm going to give Void Rivals, the whole series, issues 1 through 10, a high 6 out of 10 points, because even though it's letting me down, it's still got the basics of, you know, a vaguely entertaining story. But as far as the Energon universe goes, I like Transformers way better, and I even like Duke better, honestly. So I may be wrong sometimes, but I don't think I was wrong about this one. If you disagree, or if you read it and you agree, let me know what you think.